Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Welcome folks, this is Wear and Tear, yet another YouTube outdoor and gear review channel. Today I want to talk a little bit more about the FiTorch MR35 that failed my initial water resistance test miserably. And it's actually quite difficult to find out where the water entry point is. I had to completely disassemble the light, and I thought this might be interesting for some of my viewers. So first of all, this is glued. In order to break this glued seal, you actually take duct tape, wrap it around, protect the body, put it in a vise, and then you open it with brute force, like even with a wrench. If you do it careful enough, then you avoid damages. Like this, the anodization is still fine in this one. There's just some remnants of glue. So I had to check that out, and you can actually unscrew the reflector. The reflector is screwed in there, pushes against a thick glass lens, and between the housing, so the housing of the head and the glass lens, there is a superb O-ring. So there is no water entry point there. So this was the wrong call. You don't have to actually do that unless you want to open the head for some reason, like if you already had water ingress, maybe to clean the glass lens. So anyways, this was the wrong trace. Another idea was, of course, the flimsy USB port cover. I don't trust that, but it's fairly new, and as long as it's undamaged, it should not let water in. Now you can easily test that. You just actually take the head and then you start some air pressure, and you immediately realize whether there is a leak or not. Now, what was the problem, or what is the problem? Still haven't solved it. It is the side switch. You see the micro electronic switch in there. Now that microelectronic switch is actuated through this switch piston assembly. The switch piston assembly is not screwed in there, it's just put in there. There's an O-ring, and at first it looks like it's water resistant, and there's this ring that is additionally screwed in that holds this piston in place. Now if you look at it at first glance, it should be water resistant. Still, when I did the test, I found that there is water coming from the inside of the switch. So there was water inside this piston housing. So I had to disassemble it. And let me show you how the switch is actually built and why the switch is not really very good at keeping the water out. So first you have a little retainer ring here. You need to remove that retainer ring. Make sure not to damage the O-ring. So you remove the retainer ring. You have some pliers or something like that. Anything will do, really. Just depends on your skills, on your fine motoric skills. Like I have very little, and I still will be successful. So yeah, there it goes. It flew away just the way it should. Anyways, here's the switch. Now you can open it, and there is this piston in there. You see the piston? There's the spring. The spring is pushing against the plate. The plate is pushing against the O-ring. So, and this is in the housing there. There's a little groove in the housing. Put that inside, and this is the way it's actuated. So you see there is no membrane in there. That means that water will always get into the switch housing. Now, this one O-ring should then stop the moisture or the water from actually getting into the flashlight and damaging the electronics. In my opinion, that won't work, because if you look closely, that's my cat. If you look closely, there's always a little bit movement on the O-ring. The O-ring is probably not tight enough, it's just something, in my opinion, that's not IPX-8. Okay, if you wanna go with a piston and you wanna have an IPX-8 seal, you need at least 2 O-rings, and those O-rings, they always need to have a constant pressure on them, and they shall not move at all. So it would be better to build a switch with a membrane. My switch is not IPX-8, and I don't think yours is either, although I can't really explain why I'm the only one who is reporting that this light is not IPX-8 and has water ingress. Now let me show you something. You put that inside. See the switch, the piston is not inside. You hold your finger here and then you do the water resistance test. Build up some air pressure. There is no air coming out. So this is fine. Now you put that inside again. Put the piston inside, the switch housing. Now let's try again. Can immediately tell there is air traveling through. So there is no seal inside the switch. The switch in the inside of the switch, or actually the piston, this is the problem. This is where the water gets in. And you know what, even if you don't have, for some reason, problem with water ingress yet, or at least you didn't know there's water ingress yet, what still will happen is that water gets into the switch housing and it will stay in there for an awful long time, and it will make the insides of the piston and the spring, it will make it rot. There is no other way. So this is definitely mistake in the design of the FiTorch. Now I don't have a quick workaround for that. Basically, in order to get this switch to IPX-8 level, you need to make something like a membrane. And I don't know yet how to do that, maybe with some latex gloves or something like that. What I already tried is to add a second O-ring, like in here behind the original O-ring, so that I would have more pressure on the seal, so the seal is pushed harder against the bottom of the switch housing. So that I figured, okay, this maybe is a little bit more pressure, and that's what that switch assembly needs to be actually water resistant, but I was wrong. So I don't have a definite way yet to get it water resistant. But if your FiTorch MR35 has a switch like this, chances are that it is not really IPX-8. And if you test it hard enough under the right circumstances, you will have water ingress. I always leave this flashlight in shallow water for 20-30 minutes, and I always have a whole lot of water in there. It actually already damaged the electronics to a certain extent. I hope drying it up will get it back to normal, but I'm not sure. It might be already damaged. It's already at the point of being unreliable flashlight, and that's a shame for a flashlight that is it costs like $80 in Europe, or I mean I got it for like $40 or so, ordered it from China. Now if your FiTorch has the same type of switch, you should check it out. I don't know what to say. People on the forums responded, yeah, you must have like a Monday sample of this flashlight. Your flashlight is somehow poorly constructed, someone forgot an O-ring seal. Well, all the seals are in place, everything seems to be okay, and I still have this water ingress issue. And if I look at that switch, I know what's wrong. See how the piston is traveling. If your switch is built like that, I cannot imagine that your switch doesn't let water, or at least a certain amount of moisture in. It's definitely poorly constructed. Let me show you something. This is a $20 flashlight, or $15. Yeah? How did Sofern build the side switch? Yeah, very simple. There is a rubber cover, there's a membrane, and this membrane is pushed inside somehow against this aluminum housing. That is a watertight seal. It's not the best type of seal either, of course, but this flashlight is IPX-8, $20, $15 flashlight. they nailed it. Sofern did not nail it with this side switch. Now the other issue is I contacted Sofern 2 weeks ago, FiTorch 2 weeks ago, contacted them and said, hey guys, I have this problem. I mean, I had it swimming in shallow water, it took in a whole lot of water. They didn't even bother to respond yet. My dealer is GearBest. GearBest of course said, yeah, you mistreated the flashlight. It's not made for this type of stress, which is absurd, because IPX-8 means that you can submerge a flashlight or an object at least for several hours, at least into shallow water. So this is the problem with the FiTorch MR35. You cannot trust this switch, or I mean, basically the switch is what is inside. So this is the microelectronic switch, and you cannot trust the housing, the assembly, the actuator, basically. Also, I wonder how this would absorb shock, and just in case, because it's a very prominent switch, as I said in my initial review, it's a very prominent switch. What will happen if you have stress on this switch? If it happens to fall or something falls onto it, I guess that the microelectronic switch inside will be toast, and you have to replace it. And this is gonna be very hard, because there is no way that I found to get the driver out. So yeah, it's a wonderfully constructed flashlight, but it is not perfect. And in my case, the imperfection came to term and caused my flashlight to be flooded multiple times. So this was Wear and Tear. Thank you, over and out.